The moment my wife laughed, I realized I had been erased. Not slowly. Not politely. I mean deleted. Right there at the table, between the breadbasket and the second bottle of red. Before we go any further, if you've ever felt underestimated, invisible, or quietly dismissed by the people closest to you, subscribe, like this story, and leave a comment. You're going to want to stay with me. The dinner wasn't supposed to matter. That's the strange part. It wasn't a party. No speeches. No music. Just six adults at a small oak table in a softly lit restaurant that prided itself on being cozy. Low ceilings, candles, the kind of place where conversations lean inward and secrets accidentally fall out. My wife, Karen, called it a casual night with friends. Her friends, people she'd known longer than she'd known me. There was Mike, loud and permanently amused by his own jokes. Laura, polished, watchful, always measuring the room. Jason, who worked in finance and made sure everyone knew it without ever saying it directly. And Nicole, quiet but sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who remembered everything and said almost nothing. I was the extra chair. Karen was glowing. She'd had 2 glasses of wine already, just enough to soften her edges and sharpen her tongue. She leaned back in her chair, laughing easily, touching Mike's arm when he spoke, correcting Jason mid-sentence when he exaggerated. I watched her do this the way you watch a familiar movie on mute. You know every beat. You know what's coming. You just don't know when it'll hurt. The conversation drifted the way it always did. Real estate, markets, college tuitions, whose kid was already interning somewhere impressive, who had bought what, sold what, upgraded what. Success passed around the table like a shared language. I didn't interrupt. Then Mike turned to me. It wasn't aggressive. That almost made it worse. He smiled, tilted his head, and asked in that friendly, empty tone people use when they've already decided you don't matter. So, what do you do again? I opened my mouth. I actually did. I had a response ready. Nothing flashy, nothing defensive. Just honest. But Karen didn't even let the silence stretch. Oh, she said, waving a hand lightly, like brushing away a crumb. He's still figuring himself out. She laughed, not cruelly, casually, like it was a harmless truth everyone already knew. Mike chuckled. Jason smiled politely. Laura raised her eyebrows just a touch, like she'd been given confirmation of something she'd suspected. Nicole looked at her wine. I closed my mouth. I told myself it wasn't worth correcting. That this wasn't the place. That dignity sometimes meant restraint. The truth was simpler. I didn't want to explain myself to people who weren't listening. Karen leaned closer to the table, warmth buzzing through her voice. I mean, we all take different paths, right? She added. Some people just take longer. More laughter. Softer this time. Safer. The waiter came by to refill glasses. I declined. My hands were steady, but something inside me had gone quiet, like a room after the lights are shut off. The conversation moved on without me. It always did, but then, because moments like this always escalate, Karen glanced at me again. There was a beat. Just one. Enough for me to think she might stop. She didn't. Let's be honest, she said, smiling, voice loose with confidence. Without me, he'd be nobody. No laughter this time. The word hung there. Nobody, not unemployed, not uncertain. Nobody. The table froze. Mike shifted in his chair. Jason looked down. Laura studied me openly now, like I'd become an object of interest. Nicole finally lifted her eyes, and for the first time that night, she actually looked concerned. Everyone waited. They waited for me to explain. To joke. To defend myself. To shrink or explode. Either would have entertained them. I didn't do any of that. I sat there, breathing evenly, listening to the hum of the room around us. Forks clinking. A couple at the next table whispering too closely. Somewhere behind the wall, a phone rang and went unanswered. Karen watched me with that familiar half-smile. The one that said she'd already won whatever game she thought we were playing. I met her eyes. Calmly. Give me 10 minutes, I said. She blinked. What? 10 minutes. I repeated, reaching into my pocket. That's all I need. I didn't explain why. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at anyone else at the table. I simply unlocked my phone and stood up, chair sliding back with a soft scrape against the floor. They all watched me walk away, not curious yet. Just confused, that moment. None of them knew my name well enough to say it out loud. I didn't rush. That's what surprised me most as I walked away from the table. No racing pulse. No shaking hands. Just a steady rhythm in my chest, like something long overdue had finally decided to arrive on time. I passed the bar, nodded once at the bartender, a man named Chris I'd spoken to maybe 3 times in the last 5 years, and stepped into the narrow hallway that led toward the restrooms and the back offices. The air changed there. Quieter, cooler, less performance, more reality. Behind me, I could feel their eyes. Not literally, of course, but you know that sensation when attention clings to your back like static. Karen hadn't followed. That mattered more than it should have. She stayed seated, confident, certain. She thought this was a sulk, a bluff, maybe a theatrical pause before I came back embarrassed and smaller than before that I leaned against the wall and looked at my phone. There were names there most people would recognize, but that recognition wasn't what mattered. What mattered was history, time, decisions made quietly, without applause. I scrolled past messages I hadn't answered yet, deals that didn't need me hovering, conversations that didn't require my voice to be the loudest in the room, that I chose one contact and waited for the line to connect. "Hey," I said when the voice answered. Calm, familiar. "Yeah, I'm here." No explanation. None needed. As I spoke, I watched a server hurry past with a tray of glasses, nearly colliding with a busboy. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed too loudly. The restaurant continued its little performance, unaware of the tension sitting at one small table near the window. That I finished the call in under a minute. When I ended it, I didn't immediately move. I stayed there, phone still in my hand, thinking, not about what I'd done, but about how long I'd been silent. Silence can be discipline, or it can be surrender. I'd always told myself mine was the first. Standing there, I wasn't so sure anymore. Karen and I hadn't always been like this. That's the part people don't see. They assume distance appears overnight, like a crack in glass. In reality, it's erosion. Small remarks, forgotten questions, celebrations where one person is applauded and the other is expected to clap. I remembered the early years. Tiny apartment, folding chairs, shared plans scribbled on scrap paper. Back then, she used to ask me what I was working on. Not because it sounded impressive, because it mattered to her. Somewhere along the way, asking turned into assuming. Assuming I'd stalled. Assuming I'd settled. Assuming my quiet meant absence. That I pushed myself off the wall and headed back toward the dining room. The table looked the same. Candles still flickered. Wine glasses still caught the light. But the energy had shifted. They were talking again, though not as freely. Mike was telling a story that landed flat. Jason checked his watch twice. Laura glanced toward me and then quickly away, like she'd been caught staring. Karen noticed me last. Her smile was immediate and practiced. "Everything okay?" she asked, sweetly, loud enough for everyone to hear. I nodded. "Fine." I sat down. The waiter returned to ask if we wanted dessert menus. Karen waved him off. "Not yet," she said. "We're still talking." Talking resumed, but now it moved around me instead of over me. Nicole asked Karen about a trip she'd taken. Mike laughed a little too hard again. Jason started explaining something no one had asked him about. I listened. I always did, but this time I listened differently. Not like someone waiting for permission to speak. Like someone observing a room he understood better than anyone realized. Chris, the bartender, glanced over once. Just a flicker. A recognition that hadn't been there before, or maybe had, quietly, for a long time. Karen leaned back in her chair, satisfied. The moment, she thought, had passed. The balance restored. I folded my hands on the table and looked at the candle between us. The flame wavered slightly as someone walked by. 10 minutes hadn't passed yet that I said nothing. And that, somehow, made them all more uncomfortable than any argument ever could. Time stretches in strange ways when people are waiting for you to fail. Every second feels longer to them than it does to you. I could sense it at the table, the subtle tightening of shoulders, the way conversation kept circling back to me without ever landing. Karen tried to reclaim control by being charming. That was her talent. Charm as camouflage. She told a story about a charity event she'd attended, embellishing just enough to make it sound important. Mike nodded along, adding commentary that wasn't necessary. Jason leaned forward, eager to correct a minor detail so he could feel useful again. Laura smiled, but her eyes kept drifting toward the entrance, as if something there had quietly demanded her attention. That I noticed the waiter before anyone else did. That it wasn't the same one who had taken our order. This one moved differently. Straighter posture, slower steps. He stopped 2 tables away, scanned the room, and then his eyes found me. Not accidentally, deliberately. He hesitated, just a fraction, then adjusted his jacket and walked over. "Good evening, sir," he said to me. Just me. Karen's head snapped toward him. "We're actually still." "Of course," he said quickly, smiling at her before returning his attention to me. "I just wanted to check if everything is to your satisfaction tonight." The words landed softly but decisively. That I met his gaze. "Everything's been fine," I said. "Thank you." "Excellent," he replied. "If you need anything at all, please let me know." He didn't ask anyone else. When he walked away, the table didn't speak for a moment. Karen laughed lightly, a reflex more than a reaction. "Wow," she said. "That was attentive." Mike shrugged. "Guess they like you," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jason frowned. Laura leaned back slightly, reassessing. Nicole's eyes flicked from me to Karen and back again, slower this time. That I hadn't changed my expression. That was important. No smirk, no triumph. Just calm. Karen leaned toward me. "Did you say something to someone?" she asked under her breath. "No," I replied. That was the truth. Another minute passed. Then the manager approached. You can always tell when someone has authority in a place like that. It's not the suit. It's the way everyone else subtly clears a path. He stopped beside our table, offered a polite nod to the group, then turned to me with a smile that wasn't rehearsed. "Good evening," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert. I'm glad you could join us tonight." I stood and shook his hand. "Good to see you, Robert." Karen's smile froze. Mike blinked. Jason sat back, suddenly quiet. Laura's lips parted slightly, like she was about to ask a question and decided not to. Nicole's attention sharpened into something close to awe. "I hope the service has been up to standard," Robert continued. "If there's anything we can improve, I'd appreciate hearing it." "It's been excellent," I said. "As always." "As always," he repeated, nodding. "Wonderful. We've taken care of your table this evening." Karen laughed again, too quickly. "Oh, that's not necessary," she said. "We can." "It's already done," Robert said gently, not unkindly, but firmly. Then he looked back at me. "Please enjoy the rest of your night." When he left, silence rushed in to replace him. Mike cleared his throat. "So, you know the manager." "I know the business," I said. Karen stared at me now. Really stared. Not the way you look at someone you love, but the way you look at a stranger who has rearranged the room without asking permission. Jason finally spoke. "What exactly do you do?" he asked again, but this time his tone had changed. Careful, respectful. I didn't answer immediately. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down. "I listen," I said. "I invest. I wait." No one laughed. Karen's face had gone pale beneath the makeup. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in years, she didn't know which version of me she was sitting across from. The candle between us flickered again, casting shadows that didn't quite match the expressions at the table. And still, I said nothing more, because some truths don't need to be announced. They just need to be recognized. The strange thing about power is how quickly it rearranges the room without making a sound. No one pushed back their chair. No one stood up. And yet, everyone was suddenly sitting differently. Mike's shoulders were no longer relaxed. Jason stopped gesturing with his hands. Laura folded her arms, not defensively, but thoughtfully, like she'd just discovered a new variable in an equation she thought was already solved. Karen was the only one who didn't adjust fast enough. She kept smiling, but now the smile lagged behind her eyes. It appeared a second too late, stayed a second too long. She reached for her wine and missed the stem the first time. That tiny slip said more than anything she could have said out loud. So, she began, clearing her throat. This is new. I looked at her. Not sharply, not kindly either. Just honestly. It's not new, I said. It's just new to you. That landed harder than I expected. Laura inhaled quietly. Nicole shifted in her seat. Mike stared at the tablecloth like it might offer guidance. Karen straightened. You never told me, she said. There it was. Accusation wrapped in confusion. I nodded. You never asked. Silence again. Thicker this time. The kind that presses against your ears. Jason tried to smooth things over. I mean, that's impressive, he said, chuckling nervously. Really impressive. You should have said something sooner. Why? I asked. He blinked. Well, so people would know. I met his eyes. Know what? He didn't answer. The waiter returned, this time with a small tray of after-dinner drinks no one had ordered. He placed one in front of me first, hands steady, eyes respectful. Then, and only then, he set the others down. Karen watched every movement. Mike laughed awkwardly. Guess tonight's on you, huh? He said. I smiled faintly. It was never about the bill. Nicole finally spoke. Then what was it about? I considered that. Not for drama. For accuracy. Being seen, I said, without having to shout. Karen shook her head, a quiet, disbelieving motion. This is unbelievable, she murmured. All this time, I agreed, her voice sharpened. So what? You just let people think you were nothing. I didn't answer immediately. I looked around the table, at the people who had laughed, who had assumed, who had decided who I was without ever checking the facts. I let people reveal themselves, I said. That did it. Karen pushed her chair back slightly. That's not fair, she said. You made me look. I didn't make you do anything, I replied, still calm. You spoke. I listened. Mike glanced between us, suddenly uncomfortable to be a witness. Laura avoided Karen's eyes. Jason pretended to check his phone. Nicole watched everything, filing it away. Karen leaned toward me, lowering her voice. You enjoyed this, she said. I held her gaze. No, I needed it. She searched my face for something. Anger, maybe, or satisfaction. She found neither. That unsettled her more than if I had raised my voice. The manager passed by again, nodded discreetly in my direction, and kept walking. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Karen noticed. Her jaw tightened. The evening had crossed a line it couldn't uncross. That we sat there, surrounded by candles and quiet music, and for the first time in a long while, Karen didn't control the narrative. She didn't know how to reclaim it. Her usual tools, wit, charm, confidence, slipped through her fingers. That I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to, because the hardest thing for someone who believes they are the center of the story is realizing they never were. And as the minutes passed, that realization settled over the table like a slow, undeniable truth. The ride home was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet people romanticize. It was dense, heavy, the kind that fills every corner of the car and leaves no space to breathe. The city lights slid across the windshield in slow streaks, red and white, stopping and starting with traffic. Karen stared straight ahead, arms folded, jaw set. She didn't touch the radio. She didn't reach for her phone. That alone told me more than any argument could have done. I drove a red light. She finally spoke. So that's who you are now. I didn't look at her. That's who I've been. She let out a sharp breath. You humiliated me. I nodded once. You humiliated yourself. Her head turned toward me so fast I felt it. That's not fair. Neither was calling me nobody, I said evenly. She opened her mouth, then stopped. The light turned green. I kept driving till we pulled into the driveway, the house dark and quiet. The place we'd built together, brick by brick, routine by routine. For years, I'd thought stability was enough. That if I stayed solid, stayed reliable, everything else would sort itself out. That night taught me something different. Inside, Karen took off her coat and placed it on the chair like she always did. Carefully, precisely, control through habit. She turned to me, eyes searching now, not angry, not confident. Uncertain. Why didn't you ever tell me? She asked, and I set my keys down. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject, or corrected me, or joked about it. That's not true, she said quickly that I met her gaze. You stopped being curious about me a long time ago. That landed quietly. No drama, no raised voices. Just truth, standing between us. She sat down slowly. I didn't know, she whispered. That's the point. I replied that we didn't resolve everything that night. Real life doesn't work that way. There were no grand speeches, no cinematic reconciliation. Just two people sitting in the aftermath of something that couldn't be undone. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. Apologies, invitations, sudden interest. People who had laughed now wanted conversations. Coffee, advice that I ignored most of them, because the lesson wasn't about being recognized by strangers at a dinner table. It was about knowing who you are when no one is clapping, about understanding that silence can be powerful, but only if it's chosen, not forced. Karen and I spoke later that week. Long conversations, hard ones. Some ended in silence. Some ended in understanding. Not every story needs a neat ending, to be honest. But I will say this, that I didn't become someone that night, that I revealed who I already was. And when I finally said it out loud, it wasn't for them. It was for me. I wasn't nobody. I just wasn't loud, like you. If this story resonated with you, subscribe for more real stories like this, like the video, and leave a comment. Tell me if you've ever been underestimated and how you handled it.